And Sri Krishna, one of his very first statements in the Gita is, Najayate mriyate va kadachita. You were never born and you will never die. What a radical thought. And he's not talking just about a transmigrating being. Maybe there's transmigration, maybe there's not. I want to solve my problem right here, right now, right? And so if you can appreciate in a very immediate first-person way, I was never born, what does that mean? You're much closer to understanding the reality of things.
Namaskar, Swamiji. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's early morning at your place, but thank you so much for coming on board, and we would love to have this conversation with you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
So as we start, Swamiji, could you just lead us through your own journey, what it has been till now, and a brief background about yourself?
Certainly. I became vegetarian when I was 14 because I couldn't see myself going out and slaughtering animals. And so I figured if I couldn't kill them, I didn't have any right to eat them. And then I was lucky enough to be initiated into meditation when I was 15. I went to India when I was 19 or 20. I came back utterly disillusioned at what I found was spirituality. And so I decided I needed to read the Sanskrit scriptures, the scriptures, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, etc., in the original, because in the Sanskrit, because you read 3 translations of the Bhagavad Gita and you get, 5 different understandings or misunderstandings. So I went to university to study religious studies in Sanskrit. And when I was 23, I was blessed to meet my teacher, Swami Dayananda Saraswati. And what had previously been simply inspirational and aspirational became extraordinarily clear through his method of unfoldment. So the term that's used in Sanskrit is hasta malakavat, just like the clarity of as clear as the apple on my palm of my hand. Usually they don't use an iPhone, but that's the idea. And so I was blessed to be able to study with him since 1981. And it was just, I had a career in high tech, and then I was blessed to be initiated into the Dasanami monastic order by him a number of years ago.
So were you familiar with Advaita Vedanta before getting in touch with Swami Dayananda Saraswati, or that was your first touch point?
Yeah. No, I was carrying around every day and reading every day texts like Vivekachudamani, attributed to Adi Shankaracharya. Adi Shankaracharya is the 8th century writer who wrote the oldest commentaries we have on the scriptures of Advaita Vedanta, Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and the Upanishads, as well as other things. So I was carrying that around with me, and every morning I would take I would read something, and it was inspirational. But I failed to recognize there were systematic prakriyas. There are prakriyas which are the systematic unfoldment of certain aspect of Advaita Vedanta, which are supposed to lead to a direct and immediate recognition of the truth of oneself. And it was only when I came in contact with Puja Swamiji, my teacher, that I recognized that there's a huge depth behind this teaching. It wasn't just to give you a moment of inspiration, but it was actually the teaching, the Shruti, and the text that repackaged the teachings of the sages of ancient India was a systematic unfoldment of the truth of oneself, the truth of the world, the truth of the sacred, so that there's an immediate understanding. There's a direct understanding. It's not just meant to be inspirational, but it's considered actually a pramana, a means of knowledge, which leads to liberation.
And you did your 3-year course in the 80s, in the late 80s or late 90s. What was that?
Yeah, in the 80s. So the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam was just, the land had been purchased. And so in 86, I went there to help with the construction of the grounds. And then I studied with from 87 through the end of 89. So that was a full-time residential intense course of study where we study Sanskrit, including Panini, and then the scriptures, and also the traditional Sanskrit commentaries on them, as well as meditation and yoga and all that.
Right. And I've interviewed a few people, and they tell me that there was no phone connection. It was completely on the outskirts, so completely almost cut off from the world.
There wasn't much reason to go out. There was one payphone that was available to us. There was no reason to go out. There was no, we're finding the study itself was so joyful. And for those of us who may have had something of a monastic inclination, enjoyed the solitude and the quiet of the ashram environment, the Gurukulam environment.
Swamishi, coming to the topic of our podcast, I mean, and just from a bird's eye view, what exactly is the problem which we are facing? I mean, how would you define this problem, and why is the default way of living in the world not good enough?
That's an excellent question. The one word answer is samsara, but we don't know what samsara is, right? So not understanding the nature of things, not understanding the nature of ourselves or the world or the sacred makes us incessant seekers. We become seekers of love and security and happiness. And we seek that in things which are inherently not able to provide that, right? We seek that in things that are not inherently the source of happiness or security or love. We seek security in things that are inherently insecure, in situations and relationships. And we seek love externally. Someone once said to me, Swamiji, we all just want to be loved. And that was very interesting, because why is that? Why do some religions try to sell their religion to you saying, God loves you? Why is that? I think it's because we feel inherently unlovable, unacceptable, and we look for our lovability and our acceptability in the eyes of others, in the eyes of our partners, in the eyes of our lovers. And yet that love is conditional, right? It's you find your wholeness and acceptableness and your lovability through the eyes of someone else, but that changes in time. If you love me, I'll love you. If you stop loving me, I don't feel lovable anymore. I don't love you anymore, right? And this is a very universal and natural condition, because we cannot stop seeking. We cannot stop searching, because unhappiness and insecurity are unacceptable to us. They're unacceptable to us because these are contrary to our true nature. So one way to put it is that we're all just trying to find our way home. And we cannot stop seeking until we reach home. And that home is the source of what we're seeking, and that source is our very selves. So part of the process of understanding the problem is to understand the source of happiness. What do I need to be happy? Right? I know sadhus who have little more than a couple of dhotis and a begging bowl, and they're extraordinarily happy. And happiness is the scriptures of ancient India tell us that happiness is my very self. Happiness is in fact natural to me. I want to remove unhappiness because unhappiness is unnatural to me. It's contrary to my true nature. Who wants to get rid of happiness? Contrary, apologies to the name of this podcast, but we don't just want a little bit of happiness. We want boundless happiness, right? Unhappiness is like a rock in my shoe, an irritant that I want to remove. And so the question, part of the beginning processes of becoming understanding what the nature of the problem we're trying to solve is through spiritual practices, is what do I require to be happy? Let's say I have 100 desires, and I fulfill one of those, right? One of the desires is to go bungee jumping, right? And I go bungee jumping. Now I've satisfied one desire, but so you think I'd only be 1% happy. But jumping off that cliff with a rubber band attached to my ankles, I seem to be 100% happy. So what does the role of the fulfillment of desires really have to do with me gaining happiness? And then we have experiences where happiness seems to need no external trigger, right? I can be happy for no reason at all. So to answer your question, the problem that we're attempting to solve here is traditionally called samsara. And my teacher would translate that as, there's a couple of ways to translate that cosmologically, but we want to solve the problem of suffering right here in our lifetime. And that problem with suffering is that we try to become happy, we try to become complete, we try to become secure. And that's based on the incorrect presupposition that I am inherently unhappy and insecure and incomplete. And so based on our self-ignorance, we struggle to attain that which is in fact already attained. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Wizard of Oz. Yeah. And so, it's like we're all Dorothy trying to find her way home, like in The Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home, right? And like Dorothy, we are already home, but we just fail to recognize that reality. And so the problem that we're trying to solve is our sense of insecurity. We want to resolve seeking by discovering the truth of the seeker.
And yet, Swamiji, if we were to ask most of the people, are you suffering? I mean, the usual answer is no, I'm fine. I mean, this is life. This is how life goes on. Is there an inherent inertia towards acknowledgement that we are suffering and hence we are seeking something else?
I think when we recognize there's any gain of something that we think is going to make us happy, there's an inherent loss in it, right? Everything rusts. Everything, we keep having to feed the monkey on our backs, right? The monkey on our backs is always asking for more and more and more. I may go to the Bahamas for a vacation, right? I may spend my entire, here in America, we have very little vacation time. We might spend 50 weeks of the year waiting for that vacation. And then the vacation comes, the anticipation, the dopamine hit we get through the anticipation of that vacation. And then we enjoy the vacation, and then we find ourselves back at the job in the cubicle. So we kind of try to ride the crest of happy experiences to keep us going. But I think that, we often live without really paying attention to the struggles that we have to do and the sacrifice we need to do, the sacrifices we make to try to find moments of happiness. So when you look at our where we focus our attention, there's always a struggle. We can find moments of happiness and contentment because really that's who we truly are. But there's no need for any external triggers or source of happiness or contentment because it is who we truly are.
And how would you distinguish between happiness as you describe it and happy experiences or these moments of happiness? What is the relationship between these two?
We're told in the teaching is that you are Ananda Swarupa, you are Prema Swarupa, that your contentment lies in the recognition of who you truly are, stripped of superimposed limitations. This is called Swarupa Ananda. There's Vritti Ananda, which is caused by a particular thought form being created in the mind based on circumstances. But when we do this Ananda Vichara, this inquiry into what is the source of happiness, we see that all the stars need to line up for us to have a moment of happiness. An object of happiness has to be that we've attributed the ability to make us happy has to be present. I have to have the right mindset, right? Everything has to align for that object or that particular circumstance or that person to create a sukha vritti, a happy thought in my mind. But every thought comes and goes, even that sukha vritti. If there were something that inherently was able to produce happiness universally, I could patent it and sell it at Costco. I don't know if you have Costco where you are, right? And become a billionaire. But there's transient happiness, and then there's a contentment which rests in the purnatvam, the fullness of my being. And that if I can recognize that ananda swarupatvam atmanaha, the truth of myself being utterly content, utterly full, then all thoughts can come and go as they please. I can accommodate happy thoughts and the inevitable sad thought, the calm thought and the agitated thought. All thoughts occur within the context of existent awareness. And that existent awareness, that Satchidananda, is the source of my home, is the source of my wholeness and my happiness. So I don't need to wait for a happy thought to come to be happy, right? I don't rest my entire well-being upon a transient experience, external experience, or even internal experiences. Internal experiences and external experiences can come and go when I know the truth of myself as the source of love and happiness and joy. Then it's much more easily available, right? I have a natural sense of accommodation of the world, where the world is giving me, is accommodating pleasant experiences or giving me challenges. I can rest in a contentment because I know that my contentment is not externally created. I haven't lent my heart out to the world, right? I can still approach the world with an open-hearted love and acceptance and cheerfulness, but the situation, external or internal, do not define my contentment.
The promise of this happiness, which is everlasting, which is not externally dependent, is wonderful. But what is the roadmap? I mean, I think everybody would want that at any point in their lives, but how do they reach that?
We're all, like I mentioned, we're all seekers. We just don't know what we're seeking. So some of us identify as spiritual seekers. Some of us have seen through the folly of trying to find wholeness through the pursuit of what a tradition called artha, kama, and dharma, through external sources of security or distractions or novelty, etc. And so this is called purushartha vichara, when we inquire into what it is we're really seeking and how well is that really working for us. We become what's called mumukshus. A mumuksu is someone who desires moksha. It desires a freedom from seeking. And this is a fundamental change in one's life. One identifies that there must be something more, and so I become a spiritual seeker. But most of us are confused as to what the goal of spiritual seeking is. Even the word spirituality is confusing, right? I'm not trying to channel spirits. It's a funny word. But what is the goal of a spiritual practice? And to understand what the goal of spiritual practice is, we have to know what it is we're trying to achieve through our so-called spiritual practices. George Harrison of the Beatles paraphrased a dialogue between Cheshire Cat and Alice in Wonderland in Through the Looking Glass, and in one of his songs. And he says, George Harrison said, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there." And so most of us say there has to be something more. So where is that something more? Okay, maybe it's not in a new car. Maybe it's not in getting the biggest house or having the biggest income. But if the sadhya is unclear, then the sadhana will be unclear. If the nature of the problem of discontentment is unclear, it makes us a constant seeker, then the solution will be unclear. And if the solution is unclear, then the sadhana is unclear. The sadhana just means the means. If I want to go to the store, the sadhya would be the store, the thing to be accomplished is the store, and the sadhana would be my car, right? And so sadhana just means a means to an end. And we think of it as spiritual practices, sadhana. But without knowing what it is we want to accomplish, we won't really know what the means to that is, and therefore any road will take you there. The rishis of ancient India tell us that the source of what we seek is our very selves, and what keeps us from that recognition is failure to recognize the nature of ourselves. And so the nature of the problem we're trying to address as spiritual seekers is self-ignorance, or avidya. So if our fundamental problem suffering is due to self-ignorance, the solution is naturally self-knowledge. And this utterly reframes our spiritual quest. Recognition that the nature of the means for liberation, if you will, or finding absolute contentment and wholeness is self-knowledge, then a mumuksu becomes Jignasu. One who desires moksha, liberation, becomes one who desires self-knowledge. And so the fundamental problem being self-ignorance, the sadhya is, if it's absolutely clear, it leads to this fundamental shift of a seeker's focus, because what was now a vague goal, which could be accomplished through who knows how many means, becomes laser focused. I want to know what is the reality of myself? What is the truth of myself? What is the reality of the world? Is there a God? Why should I care? And if there is, what is the relationship among these three? And so this transformation of a general sense of being a spiritual seeker now has a clarity. One is seeking this self-knowledge. And the self-knowledge is not theoretical. Many of us think, oh, knowledge is theoretical. It's like making pizza. Pizza, if I read the recipe for a pizza, I am not going to remove my hunger, right? I have to do something to then experience the pizza. That is not the knowledge we're seeking, because if the nature of the problem is self-ignorance, what self are you talking about? You're talking about the self that is here right now. I am currently here to make mistakes about myself, and therefore I am currently here to inquire into the truth of myself, to discover in real time, have direct, immediate knowledge of who I am. So this aparoksha jnanam, this direct knowledge, is not theoretical. It's not. Many people approach the scriptures as being inspirational, that I need to experience something. But the truth of you is never not experienced. It's just covered by the failure to recognize the inherent freedom of oneself. You are awareness, ever-present awareness that illumines every experience. You are never, the truth of Atma is never not experienced. The truth of yourself is never not experienced. You are awareness itself, which illumines all experiences. It's just that awareness, which is the truth of ourselves, is tangled up with things that inherently are not us. So much of the sadhana of the spiritual practice is koham, right? But who am I? But it's the shruti, it's the teaching methodologies, it's the teacher that helps lead the vichara, the inquiry, into that kaha aham, who am I? And to help us extricate our identity from that which we are truly not. But language, it's amazing. Language can reveal reality if that thing is present to be revealed. We think of Atma as something out there. I've had people come up to me and say, Swamiji, I want to know the Atma. And you can see this, the Atma up there, some Atma, some Paramatma, some Atma that somehow is separate from me. No, it is the very Swarupa, the nature of the person who's asking what is the nature of the Atma that is ever present. And so there is no Atma to be, the liberation or moksha is not an event that happens to you. It's not going to happen in a flash of light. It's not going to approach from you outside. It's a deep recognition of who I truly am, free of any superimposed attributes of the body, mind, and senses. And once I can extricate my identity from that which I truly am not, then the truth of myself as shining, ever-present awareness becomes extraordinarily clear. And so that knowledge is aparoksha, it's direct and immediate. It's not theoretical and abstract. Because you are not theoretical or abstract, right? You are here right now. And yet I have thoughts, I have emotions, I have a body, I have senses, I have experiences, and I take myself to be those things. And that's the fundamental problem. I don't know the truth of myself. So I'm available to have all this nonsense superimposed upon myself. And the nonsense that is superimposed upon this I, this aham, this first person pronoun I, is I am the body, and therefore I am as good as the body. This is called adhyasa, superimposition. I am mortal, I'm going to die. That's problematic, right? I am my senses. I am deaf, I am blind. I am my pranas, I'm hungry, I am thirsty. I am my mind, I am my memory. Oh, I'm so forgetful. I am my mind, I'm brilliant, I'm so stupid. I am my manas, I am my emotions. I am sad. When a sad thought comes, I become sad. That's rubbish. You are present to mark the coming of the sad thought. You're fully present, illuminating that sad thought, and you are present to mark the going of that sad thought. Why should you identify with that transient chittavritti, with that transient thought that comes and goes, right? And so that's the problem of the Adhyasa. The Shankaracharya wrote this beautiful introduction to the Brahma Sutra called Adhyasa Bhashya, where he talks about this is the fundamental problem. Due to the veiling power of ignorance, it creates the green field for me to take myself to be that which I am not. And Sri Krishna, in one of his very first statements in the Gita is Najayate Mriyate va kadachita. You were never born and you will never die. What a radical thought. And he's not talking just about a transmigrating being. Maybe there's transmigration, maybe there's not. It's not particularly interesting, right? I don't really care. Why should I try to solve a problem for the next incarnation? I want to solve my problem right here, right now, right? And so if you can appreciate in a very immediate first-person way, I was never born, what does that mean? You're much closer to understanding the reality of things.
Swamiji, one quick question on what you mentioned. So there is a recognition of that something is missing. And then there is a recognition of what I'm seeking is the removal of self-ignorance. How does one go from the first stage of recognizing something is missing, to the second stage that what is missing is self-knowledge? Because there are multiple paths on that road. So that the path is the path of knowledge. How does one make that shift?
Well, you're talking about the shift from being a Mumuksu to the Jignasu, one who is a spiritual seeker. By analyzing what is the domain of action. Action can transform that which is subject to transformation. So within the Advaita, and what is subject to transformation are parts of our individuality. So the primary sadhanas is in Advaita Vedanta have to do with gaining knowledge, liberation, understanding, becoming free from sorrow, from suffering. It's a function of knowledge, not of action. And so when we investigate the efficacy of performing action, we find that the results are necessarily limited and time bound. Let's say we want to make rice. We need a pot, we need water, we need a little salt. These might be necessary, but they're not sufficient. What does the cooking is the fire. And so too, there are actions that we can perform to prepare ourselves for gaining knowledge. But those actions are preliminary, create in us the adhikaritvam, make us a fitting vessel to see this, to hold this knowledge and see the truth of ourselves so clearly that it becomes our living reality. And so when we look at what can action perform, action, I can choose to do something, I can choose not to do something, I can choose to do something different. But every action, the result of every action is time bound. The Shruti tells us, the Shruti meaning the scriptures, ancient scriptures tell us that you are nitya, you are not time bound. You are nitya shuddha buddha mukta svabhava. This is Shankaracharya's favorite phrase. You are nitya, you are not time bound. You are free of time. You are nitya shuddha, ever pure, nitya buddha, ever awakened, nitya mukta, ever free, right? And that leads me, a thoughtful person, to say, how do I come to understand that? Because the essence of the teaching of Vedanta is tattvamasi, these mahavakyas, these short, sort of pithy statements. You are that, meaning you are that which you seek to become. Now, it does not say tattvam bhavishyasi. That's a future tense. It does not say you will become that. It says you are that right now. Becoming is a function of action. Knowing is a function of a pramana, a means of knowledge. And so there are things we can do to prepare ourselves for that knowledge, but all of those make an imperfect entity, our jivatvam, our individuality, into a less imperfect entity, right? We want to up the sattva, diminish the rajas and tamas, if you're familiar with that terminology, right? And there are practices to do. We can We can calm our minds through the practice of dhyana or meditation, right? There's an intentionality and a manasa karma. There's a mental activity. We introduce japa, and we do some sort of meditation, and we quieten the mind. But a quietened mind will become active again. That's fine. The mind is meant to think. That's fine. But if we can develop through meditation a certain contemplativeness, we create the inner spaciousness to hold this knowledge and make it very clear to us, right? We can open our hearts through certain practices. We can do puja or bhakti or devotional practices. We can sing bhajans. We can do seva. We can change our emotionality. We can learn to untie the emotional knots that live in our heart through like psychotherapy or inner child work, right? That's transforming that which is transformable. We can do hatha yogasanas, a wide variety of various practices. We can do karma yoga, right? Karma yoga with the attitude as presented in the Bhagavad Gita, where we can understand that our life is naturally suffused with grace. Everything that comes to me is grace, the good stuff and the not so good stuff, and everything I do can be framed as an offering to Bhagavan, offering to the Lord, to help neutralize our ragas and dveshas, to help neutralize the push and pull of our desire system on our hearts. All of those things are action-based, but they transform that which is subject to transformation. My heart, my mind, my emotions are all subject to transformation. Atma, the truth of you, is not subject to any transformation, right? Atma is subject to knowing. Atma performs no action. Atma is not, meaning the self, is not objectifiable, because the Atma, the truth of who you are, is the truth of the subject, and you can never take the subject and pull it out and objectify it. And so you can never act upon the self as an object, because the self is the ever-present awarefulness that illumines all action. And so the transformation from how do I know the domain, the scope of action and knowledge, you look at what is the scope of each, what is the domain of each. The domain of action is the world, and the world includes your body, mind, and senses, right? This physical body is part and parcel of this physical world. The mind you can think about as is part and parcel of the subtle creation, if you will. There's the whole topic around that, right? But they're all anatma, they're all not self, and I can fiddle with all that. I can make myself a better jiva, a better person. That may give me a certain ability to live gracefully in the world, but it doesn't really solve the fundamental problem. So that's like collecting the water in the pot and the salt, but it's the fire that does the actual cooking. And Sri Krishna in the Gita says, he talks about these two lifestyles, right? Lokesmin dvividha nishta pura prokta mayanaka jnana yogena sankyanam karma yogena yoginam. He says that there's two lifestyles in this world which are conducive to spiritual growth. One is called the pravriti marga, which is a life of engagement, of a grihastha, of a householder. You have a partner, you have kids, you have a job, and that is a life of karma yoga. Karma just means action, and so it's using your engaged lifestyle for spiritual growth, right? And then there are other folks who are perhaps have more of a monastic disposition, who and a more contemplative disposition, who are on the nivriti marga, meaning that the world is not that interesting. Let me focus on the study and the teaching and the contemplation, and that's a different lifestyle. And both of these lead to moksha in their own time, but liberation is not a function of action. Liberation is a function of knowledge. So in the end, it all ends. It resolves into a deep rejiggering, it's a radical transformation of what this I thought points to, right? Because when we say I, that I can point to a lot of things. And most of the time that points to Anatma, not self. I'm the body, I'm the mind, I'm the senses, I'm the emotions, I'm all that. It's fine to spend time and energy to fix those things up. But really, what is the truth of the I that seems to be suffering the ever-changing emotions? That seems to be suffering the ever-changing conditions of the body? What is the swarupa, the truth of that self? And that, ironically, is ever present and ever available for discovery. And discovery is not through action; it's through actually a proper means of knowledge, technically.
Right. So Tattvam Asi, you already are what you seek. And if the roadmap was some action, I mean, I could probably go ahead and start doing that stuff. But how do you recognize something which is already available? What are the practices involved here?
Yeah, excellent question. So traditionally, the fundamental practices of Advaita Vedanta are the Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So there's listening to the teaching, bringing the intellect to bear on that teaching to see if it holds water, Mananam, and then bringing that understanding into the quietened space created by meditation to really own up that knowledge. This is not a belief system. Advaita Vedanta, it properly understood, is not a belief system. I don't need to believe, I need to understand. So the story, the bread and butter of this tradition is a 10th man story. Are you familiar with the 10th man story? I'll say it just in case people aren't familiar with it. I'll give you the short version. There are many presentations of this, but 10 boys went on a mission from, set from one, you can set it in any situation you want. I've said it actually in San Diego modern times and had a lot of fun with that story. But traditionally, they needed to go from one ashram to another, and they had to, on some mission, and they had to ford a stream, and they had to cross the river, and it wasn't a little stream. It was a good river, and so they put their packages on their heads and they walked across the river to the other side of the river, and they found, and the leader, let's call him Devadatta, wanted to make sure that everybody had crossed properly. And so he counted them all out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, we're missing somebody. And everybody counted out, and there were apparently only 9 of them there. And so they became extremely upset. They started looking for this missing person. One fellow made a snorkel out of bamboo and started looking under the water. A bunch of the boys went downstream. Well, maybe the boy got swept downstream. One very dense fellow went upstream. I don't know why he'd go upstream looking for the for the missing person, because why would he float upstream? Who knows? And he thought, well, maybe we should text our guru back to the Gurukulam. Maybe he decided to turn around and go home, right? And there was a sadhu, a simple holy man, sitting up, and he watched the whole situation. And he recognized that there was a problem. There's a fundamental problem. And so he approached the boys and he said, I can show you the 10th man right here, right now. And that was such a relief, right? There was such a relief. They had what's called paroksha jnana. They had indirect knowledge, which was a belief. They had trust. This person was an aptapurusha. He was a trustworthy person. But apparently, given that. And said, okay, that was in itself a relief. And so the sadhu said, these boys are so agitated. Let me tell them to go, to sit and meditate for a while to quieten their mind. Let me do some hatha yogasana, some postures to help quieten them. And so finally, when they're in the proper frame of mind, he brought the Devadatta up, and he said, okay, line the other boys up in front of you and count them out. And so Devadatta said, Devadatta is like John Smith. It's the Sanskrit version of John Smith, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Still, there's only 9 of us. The sadhu looked at the Devadatta and said, Tvam Dashamaha Purushaha. You, because of course they all spoke Sanskrit, you are the 10th man. Now look at that. We think language gives theoretical knowledge. Then we have to go practice something. The words tattvamasi, so that's analogous to tattvamasi. You are that. You are the 10th man. What did Devadatta need to do to become the 10th man? Absolutely nothing. He already was a 10th man. This knowledge is called praptasya praptihi, the acquisition of that which is already attained, right? Did Devadatta need to experience the 10th man? No. Devadatta's experience, even in the absence of the knowledge of he himself being the 10th man, his experience was fully informed by the 10th man because he was a 10th man. Did he need to believe in the 10th man? No, he didn't need to. He didn't need to do mantra. I am the 10th man. I'm the 10th man. I'm the 10th man. No, right? He needed to first create the context. So the teaching methodologies create the proper context for this direct, immediate knowledge, which is called Shabda Jnanam, a knowledge gained through Shabda Pramana, through language. So first he pointed out the 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the 9 boys. That's analogous to Neti Neti. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the senses. And this simple recognition is directly, immediately accessible. It's not theoretical. I am not that which I objectify. The world is an object, right? I know, like this glasses case. I know this glasses case. It is an object of my cognition. It is an object, I'm the subject. How do I know this body? I know this body through the 5 senses. Just like I know that glasses case. It is another object in the world. I seem to have some special powers, because it provides my I/O mechanisms. It creates my input and output mechanism, my jnanendriyas and karmendriyas, my senses and my ability to manipulate the world. But still, it's another physical thing created from, as traditionally presented, the 5 akasha, vayu, agni, apa, prithvi, the 5 elements, etc. It's a whole different topic. But it's another object that I know through my senses. I objectify the body. I am not that which I objectify. This drik-drish viveka, this atma and atma vichara, this inquiry into the nature of the knower and the known is so fundamental. How do I know that I'm sad? I see sadness. How do I know that I'm hungry? I know hunger, the pranas, right? So anything that is inherently objectifiable by me is not inherently me. Anything that changes in my presence is not inherently me. And so in the story, this is called counting them out. Neti Neti. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am not this, I am not this, I am not this, I am not this. I am not George, I am not Paul, I am not John, I am not Ringo, I am not Yoko. However you want to enumerate that, right? Another Beatles reference, I'm sorry. California Swami, what are you going to do? So you count them all out. It counts them all out. That creates the context to create the wherewithal for the simple words, you are the 10th man, to do its job. And you tattvamasi, when the student is properly oriented through this atma and atma vichara, the inquiry into self and the not self, that creates the context for these words, simple words, to give direct, immediate knowledge. Because Devadatta was always there. He was always the 10th man. And imagine, we think moksha, liberation, is going to be some experience where some blinding light comes, or I float out of the body, or some deity occurs to me, or I learn to float in midair, or the mind goes away, or whatever. No. Imagine his thought. Imagine Devadatta. I can just imagine the scenario where I am the 10th man, aham brahmasmi, right? And at that moment, nothing happened. Nothing changed, but everything changed. His sorrow was completely gone. Right? Sri Krishna says, Ashochanand Vashochistam. You're grieving for no. Right before the very first words out of Sri Krishna's mouth, 11th verse of chapter 2, he says, Ashochanand Vashochistam. You're grieving for no reason. The sadhu could have said the same thing to Devadatta. You're grieving for no reason. And right before that, in the 10th verse of the 2nd chapter of the Gita, right after Arjuna says, Shadimam Tvam Prapannam, teach me. You are my teacher. Please help me. I'm so despondent. There's a wonderful phrase that says, Sri Krishna Prahasan Niva Bharata. Prahasan means Sri Krishna as though chuckles to himself. Why would Sri Krishna chuckle, laugh, kind of grin and laugh to himself when he sees Arjuna so despondent? Because he sees that Arjuna has no inherent problem. Our sadhus saw that Devadatta had no inherent problem. It was just a failure to recognize the reality of the situation. And that's our predicament, right? We fail to recognize the reality of the situation. We think that there's a snake there. In the absence of the knowledge of there being a rope, that avarana shakti, that veiling power of ignorance, creates the context for the superimposition through viveka shakti, the projecting power of ignorance, creates the framework for us to perceive a snake. And then we relate to the snake, right? And that's our problem. We're relating to a snake that is not really there. Our problem is just one of ignorance of the reality of the situation. And the things that we need to do is to position ourselves such that the pramana of the Shruti, the means of knowledge, which is in the form of the teaching and the various teaching methodologies, can actually work. If I want to see a sunset, I live on the West Coast in California. I need to do things to position myself to see the sunset. I need to get up and walk and sit and open my eyes. But once I'm properly situated, I cannot help but see the sunset, right? What is Purushartha, what is within my choice, my capacity to act, is the preparation to position myself to see the sunset. But once the pramana, pratyaksha, the means of knowledge, the eyes are open, then my knowledge is inevitable. It's inevitable because the object is there to be seen, and the means of knowledge is functioning, and I'm prepared. And that's our situation. We do things there's something to do and something to know. The things to do prepare us for this knowledge, and the thing to know is the truth of myself and the reality of the world, and if there's a God, and what is the relationship among these three.
Wonderful story, Swamiji. I think it encapsulates everything which you just said. A couple of questions on that. One is that just like once Devadatta knew that he is the 10th person, he could no longer be confused. I mean, that's the end of his problem. But is it the same with the self as well? I mean, once it's known, there is no going back, or do we continuously have to be a part of these practices of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, living it, experiencing it? How does it work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we can think of Devadatta's younger brother. Let's call him Yajnadatta. And, Devadatta was a good person, but you know how older brothers always tease younger brothers? Devadatta always called Yajnadatta something of a tube light. You know, tube light? Like a fluorescent light, which you turn the switch on, it takes a minute, right, to turn on. Devadatta would tease Yajnadatta. He said, "Oh, Yajnadatta, you're one papadum short of a tali." Right? And so he didn't quite grok it right away. The same scenario. The sadhu said, "You are the 10th man." He said, "Really? Huh? What? Theoretically, you're right. I want to experience being the 10th man. What japa should I do, etc." So this called sabpratibandhaka jnanam, a knowledge with some obstacles. So when we listen to the teaching, there are times where we have these extraordinary, like the first time I heard Puja Swamiji, my guru, teach, it was just so extraordinary because, like I said, what had been inspirational, aspirational became extraordinarily clear. And that clarity lasted until I left the lecture hall, right? And so I certainly was not an adhikari. Some of us are, so people like maybe like Ramana Maharshi or others, some of us come well prepared to appreciate this, to understand this. And some of us need some additional work, right? Some of us are like parboiled rice. You just, you just need to microwave it for a minute and it's done. Others of us are like brown rice that we need to be put in the pressure cooker and need to really work on it, right? And like to use more food analogy, like a rasagula, gulab jamun, we need to soak in the sweetness of this teaching. And so repeated, there's a phrase that says, "Pavna prunina shravanam kuryat." May one do shravanam, may one listen again and again until it becomes absolutely clear. And so, this Bhagavad Gita is an extraordinary text because it's both a Brahma Vidya and a Yoga Shastra. it teaches this knowledge, but it's also a handbook for gaining adhikaratvam, to making us into, helping us transform ourselves into a fitting vessel for this teaching, through various practices that he discusses. And so that's, like he told David that to sit down, do some dhyana, etc. But some of us don't get it. Most of us don't get it the first time around, because we've so wedded to these notions of who we are as jivas. And we've done as individuals, and we've done so much work to polish this individual that I am, that, I shimmy my shoulders and say, oh, look how beautiful I am, look how smart I am, look how tall I am, look how wealthy I am, right? We have a lot invested, and we've had infinite lifetimes before to live with this confusion that I am this limited being. And so what Shravanam does, so when I was in my monastic training in the Gurukulam, we would have several classes a day. Some of Sanskrit and Panini, the traditional grammar, and also, but most of it was the Prakarana Granthas, which are the books which take the teaching of the Upanishads and present them in perhaps more systematic or other ways, or the Gita, or the Shankaracharya Bhasha. The beauty of learning Sanskrit is not just so you can read Sanskrit, but you have direct access to the minds of the most profound and wise people that ever lived, in my humble opinion, right? I want to hang out with holy people, and Shankaracharya is one of the holiest person I can think of. And so being able to have access to his teaching, to his commentaries on these exquisite texts, is a way to have satsang, right? And so we come to this teaching. So in the process of listening to the teaching as expressed through the guru, our minds take on the same shape as the gurus, and the gurus hopefully has the same shape as the rishis of ancient India. In other words, the Rishi Drishti, how's that? Rishi Drishti, the vision of the sages of ancient India who express their wisdom in the Upanishads, etc. Your guru hopefully has that vision for himself and has the ability to communicate that vision. So Brahmanishta and Ashrotra, he knows the material, and it's his living reality. And through the power of words, through language, through Shabda Pramana, just like our sadhu gave Devadatta the wisdom of himself being the 10th man, the guru can, through words, create that same vritti, the same thought form in your mind, so that the guru's knowledge, the guru buddhi, becomes shishya buddhi. The teacher's mind becomes your mind. And that happens in real time at the time of teaching, if you have shraddha, if you have an openness towards what is being said. If you've put aside your preconceptions of who you are and what spirituality is. Many of us have trouble listening because we've invested so much time in our spiritual life that we want to put the teaching of Advaita Vedanta, pure Advaita Vedanta, in the context of everything else we know. And oftentimes it doesn't fit because it's not like anything else you've ever known, in my humble opinion. We may be more like Yajnadatta than Devadatta. Most of us need to come kind of soak in this teaching so that it becomes our living reality, and also almost embarrassingly obvious, right? So I imagine when Devadatta recognized, I am the 10th man, he could have done a little dance, but I just imagine Devadatta exchanging glances with the sadhu and saying, how silly I was, right? That's a jnani's perspective. How silly I was. It was right there for the taking, right? But Yajnadatta needed to hear, you are the 10th man, you needed to do more Shravanam. Here, let me tell you again. Let me point out again. Let me do some practices and listen again. And so every time we hear and we have that, there's profundity here, and it's talking about me, then that vision of oneself being just Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Swabhavatma, this Atma which is ever pure and ever free, becomes increasingly clear. And so it becomes the natural place from which one engages the world. And that's what a Jivan Mukta is. Jivan Muktaha is one who's free even while living, where one engages. So there's not a whole lot of similarities. There's some similarities perhaps between Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. But one beautiful phrase, I think that's attributed to 8th century Zen poet, is, before enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. After enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water, right? So nothing has changed, but everything has changed. Because you carry your contentment with you, right? And you recognize, in fact, it's much more than that. You give reality to the world. That's a whole other topic. But the existence that we attribute to the world is the existence which is Atma Sarupa, the truth of oneself. So Brahman is a word that we use for that which gives reality to the world, that by which I can say the chair exists, the table exists, etc. But we think of existence as an attribute. Existence is not an attribute, it is a substantive. We think this is a wooden table. It's not a wooden table, it's tably wood. Because the only thing of substance there is the wood upon which is superimposed the form of a table. And so too, we think this entire creation is real and that existence is an attribute of the things of the world. But it's not true. The world is not an illusion, but it ain't real either. It's what we call mithya. Sadasabhyam anirvachaniyam. It's neither real nor unreal. It has a dependent reality. That which the world depends upon is called Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi is the Mahavakya. I am that Brahman. So in fact, the entire world depends upon the existence, which is the truth of myself. Not this little jiva, right? But the truth of myself is the very existence of the entire creation. Just like the truth of a dream is the dreamer, right? I can incarnate into a dream, play a certain character in a dream, but the existence of the dream, the awareness that other people in a dream express, the awareness of the character I've incarnated into the dream world as, all of those are superimposed upon the existent, awareful dreamer. And in the end, that's the vision of Advaita Vedanta, that the entire world is not much different than the dream world. There are obvious differences. I seem to wake up in the same bed every morning until I don't. But still, we question the reality of the world. It has a dependent reality. It has a borrowed reality. It's neither real nor is it unreal. It lives in this gray area, which we call mithya. Just like the clay pot. We take the pot to be real. The pot is not real. The pot is a form superimposed upon clay. There's nothing potty about clay, because clay can take the form of a plate, a bowl, or a pot, right? And so to this entire creation is just really attributes superimposed upon the one substantive, which is Brahman, which is the truth of who I am. And it takes a while for that to become absolutely clear. And contemplation helps. So the Shravanam, listening, Mananam, it's not a belief system, but so the reality is not revealed through logic, but logic is used to resolve doubts and to really question. Questioning this is a knowledge tradition, and in knowledge, questioning is invited. Arjuna peppers Sri Krishna with questions. There's a whole Upanishad called Prashna Upanishad. Shankaracharya, in his commentaries, constantly brings up objections and questions so he can address them, because all the pieces have to fit together in your mind. You can't just say, okay, I'm Brahman, now what? That doesn't bless you, right? And then if there's still issues seeing that very clearly, we bring it into deep meditation called nididhyasana. And so we quieten the mind and we bring the teaching in to the mind, right? Aham Purnaha, I am whole, I am awareness, I am fullness itself, right? And we bring, in a form of a mantra perhaps, Chaitanyoham, I am just pure awareness, Chaitanyoham. And you bring the word in, you see the meaning. You bring the word in, you see the meaning. Bring the word in, you see the meaning, the word drops, and you are that meaning. That's samadhi. That is the clarity in deep meditation that comes when all the other dynamics of the mind are suspended. And then we can begin to take that clarity of vision and that inner spaciousness that we we gain in meditation out into our daily lives, and it transforms our entire life. But that recognition is not a function of meditation. We can't meditate on the truth of ourselves in nididhyasana unless we know the truth of ourselves, right? And if the intellect can just fly wherever it likes without any obstacle, then we know that we have some clarity regarding it. So there's a repeated process of shravanam, listening to the teaching to assess its veracity, and to listen to it. It's extraordinarily personal. There's nothing more personal than Atma. It is the truth of you, the awareness, which is you. And so this teaching is extraordinarily personal, right? We have to take this very, very personally. Not, it's not offensive at all. If someone says, you are whole, you are lovable, you are complete, you are full, you are everything you've ever wanted to be, sure, let me take that personally. There's no problem taking that personally, right? But this teaching, this I thought has to land, this ahankara has to land properly. And so we listen, we evaluate. Many religions fear questioning. There are many religions that say, oh, that's the devil making you ask questions. Just believe, just believe, just believe. What if a sadhu had said to Devadatta, oh, just believe me, you don't have to understand. That kind of falls short of the whole exercise, right? That doesn't solve Devadatta's problem. But there's an early phase where you say, you have trust in what Devadatta had trust in what the sadhu was about to teach him. And so he opened his mind and listened. And that's the attitude with which we approach the teaching. And if it's not clear, we come and listen again, and we ask questions, and we take it into meditation. And finally, it becomes as obvious as, hopefully, it becomes as obvious as Devadatta himself being the 10th man was to him.
Swamiji, in the long line of questions, there is this question of why. Why this dream? Why this projection power and the veiling power? Why this ignorance which we have to remove?
Yeah.
Could you throw some light on it, on this why part?
Yeah. So the best answer I found, and the best answer I can come up with, is that in the end, the question why turns out to be a silly question, an absurd question. In the end, it's really a no-op. No-op in computer science? It's an operation that doesn't lead anywhere, right? It's like when I experience the snake that's superimposed upon the rope, when there's really just a rope there, but I see a snake, and I ask, why is that snake so frightening? How did that snake get here? Should I kill or capture that snake? How fast can I run away from that snake? Will it chase me? Why did God create such horrible reptiles? Actually, snakes get a very bad reputation because everybody thinks snakes are slimy, and they're not. But anyway, some people don't like snakes much. But it's much more fruitful to ask, is there actually a reason for me to fear? Is there really a snake there? Is that actually a snake? Right? It's much more fruitful for us to fearlessly investigate the situation. And then you'll see that it's really a cosmic joke. You'll see that Bhagavan, the Lord, really has an exquisite sense of humor. I think that's the best answer I can give for that. And Ramana Maharshi, I think I'm in good company. Ramana Maharshi would never ask questions like this. He'd usually try to steer the questioner into who's asking the question and why bother with that until you answer the question who you are. And then the question of these whys become much less important.
Swamiji, this has been a wonderful session. I think in this 1 odd hour, we covered a lot of ground. Before we end, you already told a wonderful story of Devadatta, but is there any other verse, any other story which comes to your mind, which has had an impact on your own personal journey?
I think the 10th man is an important story. There is one shloka from Shankaracharya's guru's guru, was Gaudapada. And he wrote a commentary in verse form on the Mandukya Upanishad, which Shankaracharya comments on. The Mandukya Upanishad is a very short Upanishad. Om ityeta daksharamidam sarvam. This entire world is Om, is Brahman. And it's a very beautiful exposition of the 3 states of experience, etc. And then, as I said, Gaudapada wrote a commentary on that, and Shankaracharya wrote a commentary on that. And one verse that always comes to mind, or part of a verse, is it may be it may be too much really to express shortly, but Adau ante chayannasti vartamane tattata. It talks about the mithyatvam of creation, the relative reality of creation. And the reason why this is important to me is that, so it means that Adau ante chayanna asti, that which has a prior and posterior non-existence, that which previously didn't exist, and that which it won't exist in the future, should be considered, its reality should be considered the same even in its presence. Vartamanepi tattata. Meaning that everything comes and goes, but the reality, the satyam, that which is true, doesn't come and go. And that satyam is Atma Chaitanya, is the awareness which I am. And the reason why I bring this up is that I used to work in high tech. Usually sannyasis don't traditionally talk about their purvashrama, the previous lifestyle, but people sometimes find it interesting. I used to live, as a software, in Cubicle City in Silicon Valley, working in a cubicle, as a software development manager. And one of my reports was from Kerala. And in my office, I had a picture of Sri Dakshinamurti, who's my Ishta Devata, Shiva as a form of teacher. Very beautiful imagery there. Sri Dakshinamurti Stotra is extraordinarily profound. But I had in Devanagari, in Sanskrit, I had printed on, pinned to my wall, this shloka, Ata ante chiyannasti vartamani tattata. And this fellow was from Kerala. And he saw that there. And, the person who reported to me, and he said, "What is that? What's all this?" Right? And what does that mean? And I explained it to him, and he looked at me and said, "Why are you here? Why are you doing what you're doing here? If this is, the implication is, are you living the life that you were meant to live?" And to me, that simple question was transformative, because it opened opened my mind towards, whose life am I living? Why am I not following my passion? Right? Why am I not doing what I know, what really is the source of my joy? And that began to open the door for me to leave high-tech job and assume a life of a sannyasi. So to me, that has always been a very profound in and of itself, but also very transformative shloka for me.
It is, Swamiji. It's part of a lot of stuff which is shared today, and I think a lot of it is thought-provoking at the least, and at least shows a direction to people who are not introduced to the tradition. And those who are familiar, it's a very nice roadmap of the journey, the pathway, and what we are seeking. A lot of gratitude to you, Swamiji, for sharing all your knowledge and taking out the time. It's been really, really wonderful having you here. Thank you so much.
I thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share what I've been taught.
Thank you so much. Namaskar, Swamiji.
Om Tat Sat.